So I will now suspend the standing orders, and I will put our secretary, Michael, to give you a speech.
Okay. Can I say, comrades, that this month, for the first time ever, I was able to incorporate email into the email, some video. And I know that some of you actually clicked onto the video because some wiseacre commented, and I know who it was, commented, "Oh, it's a world premiere, is it? Should it be a black tie event? Sammy Morris, that was you." But anyway, it is a world premiere because I'm launching a new initiative today, and I'm hopefully going to get at least your support, if not financially, at least morally, for the concept. Many years ago, in fact, more than 40 years ago, my eldest daughter went to school. And on the first day, the teacher went round the whole class and asked them what their daddy did for a living. Now, we lived in quite a middle-class area. There was a number of housing officers who lived near us, and teachers and people like that. But when they got to my daughter, she proudly told the whole class that her dad sold raffle tickets. Now, as a consequence, we got a letter home to see if we qualified for free school meals. But she wasn't far wrong, because at the time, I was the secretary. I better just get in camera here so they can see me. I was the secretary of Birmingham Trades Council, which was a full-time job. And I had to live on my wits because, would you believe it, you couldn't get the money off the unions to keep the bloody thing going. I had to try every trick in the book to raise money, you know, and I became a trade union entrepreneur. Now, I've got to be honest with you, there's very few of us about, because most trade union officials, they just get their paycheck every month and go about recruiting. They don't have to try and raise money to keep the show on the road. Now, it was also the case that in the 1980s, I was the vice chair of the Economic Development Committee of Birmingham City Council. And I kid you not, there were Thatcherite businessmen in Birmingham that you could read about every day in the Morning Post, demanding a smaller state and cutting back on the state. And they were the very same businessmen that used to form a queue to get every handout they possibly could off the council for any development they wanted. So I learned a wee bit about capitalism and how it worked. Now, eventually, some years ago, some of you will know, Susanna and I moved to Scotland, and she said to me, "You better make yourself useful." And Susanna had quite a big, nice house down near Dunoon, and we turned it in to a B&B. And incidentally, I became a master at doing poached eggs. So if you're ever down my way, I can do you a nice poached egg. But anyway, we advertised our business through Booking.com. Some of you will be aware of it. And at the end of the season, I got a cheeky email off Booking.com, which said, "We've only been charging you 15% commission on any bookings you've got via us, but we can put you to the head of the queue over the off season to get more bookings, provided you agree to pay us 25% commission." And I thought, that cheeky bastards, I'll be honest with you. And so I started to research this, and I discovered there were all these multinational firms like Booking.com, Uber, Amazon, and the others, which were like a new formation, because they actually didn't do anything themselves. What they did was put the buyer and seller together and charge commission. In fact, as Yanis Varoufakis, the former Greek finance minister, put it, they are a new form of capitalism. They're cloudalistas. That's what he calls them. So I then thought, what we need to do, because I know a little bit about IT and computers and that, I thought what we need to do is the left should have its own arrangements. And I went off big and I set up, not Amazon. They tried to sue me for using not Amazon in the title. But as it happens, I thought I'd get away with it because it clearly wasn't Amazon if it said not Amazon. And then I discovered that in Australia, they had an organisation called Union Shopper. And I thought, bloody hell, if they can do it in Australia, they can do it here. So I invited over people from Australia in 2013 to do a tour of the UK to set up not Amazon. And I can remember before then that there were general secretaries that you'd see occasionally at meetings, and you'd see these senior union officers, and they'd be pulling out the latest Apple iPhone from their pockets. And they were ever so proud because they had cutting edge technology. And it just demonstrated how valued they were by their union when they had this. But the fact of the matter is that Apple is one of the biggest anti-union firms in the world, so much so that Foxconn, the organisation or company that builds Apple iPhones in China, has had to put safety nets around the top of some of its factories because the young workers in there got so depressed working for Foxconn making Apple iPhones that some of them on their lunch break, which wasn't very long, by the way, would go to the top floor and throw themselves off to their death. This is true, they put safety nets around to stop that happening. Now, as far as I'm concerned, you are all my brothers and sisters, but I do have to say, being a one worlder and an internationalist, I am concerned about the fate of our Chinese brothers and sisters. So I got these people from Australia over, cost us about £5,000, got me LVW van fixed up, had meetings in London, Birmingham, Manchester, and here in Glasgow, went to see the Union General Secretaries, got the TUC to organise a meeting with their IT officers of different unions to talk about how we're going to develop not Amazon and union shopping across the piece. At the last minute, the TUC contacted me and said, unfortunately, there's not enough interest for the meeting to go ahead. And I remember sitting in union head offices in London, trying to go in with Australian trade unionists from Union Shopper Australia, and nobody wanted to talk to me. I mean, they obviously thought that Mick is full of good ideas, but when it comes to the push to, we're not going to do anything for him. So I then understood that if you're going to make a difference, you can't do it from the top down. You've got to do it from the bottom up. Well, a couple of years ago, in fact, a year ago, we were away in Gibraltar seeing Susanna's son, who's a consultant neurologist. And when I was there, I came across a shopping app. And I decided this was exactly the sort of thing. I can't minimize it. I wanted to show you something on the screen, but you can't see it on the screen anyway. I decided that I could develop this app for Union Shop. And as a consequence, I put together a new app, Union Shop app, contacted the company, and then looked for companies that would go online. I have to say that to begin with, we are going to develop simply local takeaways and get them online. When I was a councillor in Birmingham, I represented a load of people in the Balti Triangle, and I still have contacts there. So I've now put on 6 restaurants onto the app. It should go up in the next couple of weeks to over 20. And I'm having a meeting with the Kings Heath and Moseley Labour Party, who are going to undertake to distribute these cards around, and I'll pass them round for you, I've got 15,000 of these printed, to every household in the B13 postcode area. And what will happen, we will recruit people to the app to get takeaways in the Kings Heath and Moseley area. And we estimate that after we've ramped it up, we ought to be able to get somewhere in excess of £20,000 a year for local purposes, which the Kings Heath and Moseley Labour Party will have nominating rights over. What it means, right, is that when everything else has been paid for, the surplus, because it's a not-for-profit, will actually go on any campaign purpose that they nominate, as long as the app users in that area agree to that it being used for that purpose. Now, what we're also intending to do, whilst we're starting off with takeaways as a takeaway facility, and we will be liaising with student unions as well, because obviously quite a lot of students tend to use those sorts of apps. We do intend via Unite's affinity services, and I've had a meeting with Joe Rollins to discuss it with him, to populate other categories on the app, whereby we are also promoting, you know, companies that are selling insurance or holidays or electrical goods and so on. And eventually we will populate the other areas on the app so that people can all order a range of different products. Having said that, of course, the employers that are advertised on the app have to be good employers that support trade union rights and workers' rights. And 1% of every transaction will be top sliced and will go into a global solidarity fund that will be given to the Progressive International. Now, we are intending, once we are established in one relatively small geographic location, B13, to roll it out into other towns and cities. And we will then get trades councils, Labour parties, I don't even mind if the SNP want to get involved at a local level, to be the nominating organisations in their area. They would have to recruit some takeaways that are union friendly in their patch, right? And that will be the offer. And they would have to provide a distribution door to door of these sorts of cards in their area to recruit people to the app once we've got it up and running in their area. And what I'm hoping is that Unite will provide a sort of rolling bursary to each of these community groups. It could be a Unite community branch, for them to have enough money to get it going. Because obviously, for each of the restaurants that join the scheme, you've got to provide them with a point of sale terminal so that they get the orders through to their establishment. You know, you've got to be able to provide these sorts of cards and so on. So I estimate it's about £3,000 or £4,000 to get a local scheme going. And I'm hoping that Unite will provide these rolling bursaries, because they'll then have first right to get the money back once it goes live and starts to get some money back into the shaker. So what I'm hoping, in effect, is that with Solidarity Shopping, the Union Shop app, which will go live in the next few weeks for Birmingham, it's no good. I mean, you could download it and put it on your phone, but they ain't going to deliver to you, are they? Because it's got to be local to where the restaurants are to begin with. That we will then have a way to commercially provide an income source to grassroots organisations, so that trades councils will have significant funding, local Labour parties will have significant funding, community groups and so on will have significant funding. Because I think that will make a huge difference to the politics that we have. Because at the moment, everything is top down, and we've got to make it bottom up. And we've got to have resources at the bottom if we are going to change the world. So I've got further details about the Birmingham Good Employer Code, which is based on the Unite Hospitality Code. And I've got more details about the Union Shop Act, which were going to be on the big screen, but obviously that hasn't worked. So, Chair, I will sit down and see if there's any points or questions that members may wish to raise.
Thank you for that, Mick. Mick, the only one that springs it, is it similar, do you think, to the co-op or what your co-op used to be?
Well, I can say that many of you will know that co-ops, particularly, well, our co-op, started as a consequence of bad, I mean, particularly company towns, where the employer would actually have the distribution or whatever grocers, and in some occasions they would be selling shoddy goods, and so therefore there was much more of a need for people to come together to make sure they got pure goods, and they actually then set up sort of bulk buying schemes and co-ops and so forth. Now, of course, what's happened is that people and employment is not necessarily so based in one location. So it's a bit similar, I would say, to what the co-op is, except there is going to be a percentage for the Global Solidarity Fund. That's always going to be there, 1% of each transaction. But it's about maximising the use of the internet for shopping for trade union purposes. And eventually what I want to do is to get a system a bit like Amazon, except only promoting the goods of good employers. Now, it is the case that this idea of having union support for union-made produce has been around for some time. In America, there's the Union Label campaign. If you go to the States, you can buy a can of beer, Coors beer, and at the side of it, it says brewed by union labour. I always think it tastes a bit sweeter when you have one of those. But unfortunately, the real problem with the Union Label campaign in America, it basically descended into buy American. They were on about buying American produce, protect American jobs. So it wasn't about, international. It wasn't an international type thing. So there we are. Now, I may have other people who are trying to get in here. 2 people are in the waiting room. This is it when you're trying to do too much. Let me have a look. So I don't know whether there's other things.
Is there anybody else from the floor? Billy, you're
listening to Nick, just an observation of his last points there. The trade union label system has worked in the UK, certainly in a small, limited category. For example, the Scottish Typographical Association print union here in Scotland adopted the system to ensure that employers met certain standards, and everything that was printed in that building had the union label applied to it. Another interesting one down in England was the felt hatters used the same thing, and the rim of the hat, the inside of the hat, the sweatband used the same thing. And we have several of them in our collections, but just to let you know, it does operate, or it did operate here in Scotland, and the Scottish Typographical Association is extremely successful. Just an observation.
Willie Oswald, 2 things. One, that sounds very interesting, and it might cause me to migrate to a fancy phone. But the second thing, the co-op, our co-ops anyway, they have this distribution scheme where you can vote for local organisations. And in our community, the one that came out the top was what was called the Wee Spuds, which is attached to our allotments, and it's encouraging growth. But the co-op shops rely on retail. Do you envisage that this a future development could be that a local shop, a retail shop, could link their till sales to a membership card, the way the co-op does, not just online things?
Well, I mean, initially attempting to develop it as an online facility.
Yeah.
And it's interesting what you say about the co-op, because similar things happen, I think, in a lot of co-ops. But they tend to be local worthy charities that get support. And I've got nothing to say against that. But we are deliberately not going to go for charitable status for the simple reason that we want to be able to fund political campaigns. Because if you're going to change the world, you can't just give it all away to charities. And therefore, we're going to pay all of the taxes to ensure that we are able to give money for political purposes. And of course, it will be up to the app users in a similar way to vote on whether or not it goes to this or the other. And the nominating organisations, which will be the participant businesses, but also the local community organisations who do the work on the ground, they can nominate what happens to the surpluses. And therefore, because we can work out from the postcode, you know, how much money has been generated in that area, therefore what the profit is, and we know who the users are in that postcode area. So we can actually email them to sort that all out. So it is primarily going to be an online shopping business. And if it's successful in that, and it beds down, we might think of other things. But at the moment, I think it's a big enough ask to try and get it to work as an online shopping facility. I do actually have some contacts in the USA through my brother, as it happens, who's based in New York. And I've been trying to entice them into the notion of Union Shopper America. USA would then become a progressive term, wouldn't it, if we were able to do that? And of course, the thing is, if you can get it going in one location, a small location, right, you can roll it out to other locations because it is replicable. You can, you know, replicate it across the piece. And I'm hoping, quite frankly, that if we get it going in Birmingham, the word will go out. And maybe in Glasgow Trades Council can take on, you know, is it the G41 postcode where all the shoppers are that go for takeaways? I don't know, one of those Pollocks, is it, or Pollock Shores or somewhere like that. Yeah, whatever. And that we can then get out the info and recruit people. And of course, the trouble is you can't get the big chains to sign up because, you know, it's a manager, they can't make decisions, and, you know, it's a new thing. Why would they get involved? And anyway, they've then got to sign up to be a good employer and union friendly and all the rest of it. But you can get small family-owned restaurants to sign up on the basis that they know the trade unions stand up and are part of the anti-racist movement. You may not, because it's a family-run business, getting them all to join the union, but you can get them to be union friendly, and that's what you want. If they're union friendly, get them signed up, get them on board, and we will be charging, by the way, 10% commission, which is a lot less than Just Eat and Uber Eats. You know, that's a pretty good deal, really, for restaurants. So there we are. If we get it going in Birmingham and we're successful, I can see that the walking group might, on one of their occasions, go round the streets and give these out. I can see it happening, you know, and maybe help out the community branch, who I'm sure would be keen, and we've got a representative here today, to get some decent money in their bank account from this sort of activity. Okay.
Is there anybody else wants to make anything? The only thing I want to be saying, Mick, is that you've given a good account of yourself today. You're going down to Birmingham, hopefully, but we need more information, of course. We need to start writing things that you can bring to the branch that we can take away and study. Because with the one thing, I don't know where we're going with it, to be quite honest. I know where you would like to go with it. But at the end of the day, I thought it's new, it's innovative. I've never heard that kind of debate before. So it's a first for the branch. So I think we need more information. And at the end of the day, I'd like to thank you for your contribution.
Well,
You're in a hurry, Nick, but at the end of the day, can you bear with us?
Yeah, half an hour, no problem. Do me job.
Do we have any new members? No?